people as well.
I do my best. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a live Substack moment with Justin Wolfers. You guys have seen Justin on MSNBC. You've seen him all over the media in the last few months because he has really become a trusted voice of analysis and understanding about this economic moment that we're in. And a lot of it's not great, but he explains it with a great degree of clarity, which I really appreciate. So thanks for joining us today, folks. We appreciate you guys as always. Justin is a professor at the University of Michigan. As he said when I talked to him in the pre-show, go blue. And just really, like I said, one of the smartest guys on the economic scene right now, cuts right to the chase on it. So I wanted to talk to you about the thing that's shaping all of our economic moment right now, which is this on again, off again, in out trade war. And there's this belief, I think, on Wall Street that it's over or it's winding down. Talk to us about the consequences that are still going to play out over the next few months, even as Trump is sort of back down a little bit on China.
Yeah. So there's at least two, probably three things going on, maybe four. First is a trade war, which is Trump has imposed tariffs, very high tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
To get the language correct, he has not imposed tariffs on China. He has imposed taxes on Americans who've imported from China. Incredibly important to get that language clear. When he goes over to Geneva to negotiate with the Chinese, or he sent the Treasury Secretary, one is left wondering, you don't actually have to go to Geneva to cut taxes on Americans. You can do that from the comfort of the White House.
Sure.
So that is obviously the critical intellectual misunderstanding at the heart of the Trump agenda, that this is a tax on China, not on Americans.
Sure.
So there's a tariff shock, 30% on extra on China. We already had tariffs on China, right, 10% extra on the rest of the world. That is very large. As at the present moment, if that's where it sticks, it's probably just short of Smoot-Hawley being the famous Depression era tariffs.
Right.
But still the highest we've had since 1934.
And Smoot-Hawley kind of had a disastrous outcome and scared us off tariffs for a long time because it was really kind of, I thought, the last gasp of a sort of failed economic theory that stretches back to when we were doing our global trade with sailing ships. And now it's a big complex supply chain. And as you said, that tax that is going to be paid by consumers has now broken into the open with the CFO of Target or the CFO of Walmart and the CEO of Target coming out and saying, guys, prices are going up because of these things. How long do you think it takes for that to trickle through so that Americans, when they're in the line at Walmart, when they're in the line at Target, when they're buying something off Amazon, that they really start to see the punch of these increased prices and this weird slowdown in the supply chain?
Yeah, it's let me disappoint the folks who want a rabbit answer, which is it might be smaller than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that only about we only import only about a sixth of what most people buy is imported.
Okay.
So if a sixth of stuff becomes 1/10 more expensive, that gives you 1.6% higher prices on average. You might want a little bit more because there's higher tariffs on China, so we can get to 2.
Right.
And that's not overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's really important that I explain the following. We had a lot of inflation after the pandemic.
Right.
Prices started rising, but then what happened was because my employer could charge a higher price for what they sell. In my case, it's education. In your case, Rick, it's brilliant podcasts and Substack subscriptions and so on. But all prices were rising. Because prices were rising, what I was producing, economics lectures, was getting a higher price. Therefore, my employer could afford to pay me more.
Mm-hmm.
So prices would rise and then wages caught up.
Right.
And so there was a period through 2022 and 23 where I was often saying to the public, hey, inflation, don't worry about it. It's not often received well when you tell people that, so I'm not a politician. But it was because I wanted to make the point this is a temporary disruption. Prices are going up. Your wages will catch up. Very painful while we wait, but it'll take a year or two. But really, nothing's coming out of your hide.
Mm-hmm.
That's very different than a tariff-fueled inflation. A tariff-fueled inflation is your boss now has higher costs. Your boss, therefore, has to raise prices. Your boss now doesn't have more money left over at the end of the day. You didn't become more productive. What you're producing didn't become higher priced. You're not getting caught up. Ever. I wanted to make that really important distinction. So during COVID, it may be prices rose 9%, your wages that year rose 3%, so you were 6% in the hole.
Sure.
For a year. Maybe you got half of that back the year after and the rest of the year after that. So maybe you're 9% in the hole in total, not right? Here you're 2% down, so 4.5% out for 2 years. So much math going on. But if prices go up 2% and you never get it back and you live another 60 years, that's 120%. Right?
Right.
So that's 10 times more painful than the COVID, than the larger COVID inflation.
It's a self-inflicted wound in the economy that strikes me as something that I don't think a lot of I know some of these people from the Wall Street universe, the Ray Diallos and the Jamie Dimons, and the folks at Citi, they've all tried to sort of like pretend it's going to all be okay. But now I'm starting to see them signaling some much darker language in the last couple of days and weeks. What do you make of the sudden, Ray Diallo is practically apocalyptic right now, and maybe that's a little more on brand, but what do you make of the sudden discussions by, again, Jane, I can't remember her last name, the head of Citi, was very, very grim about this stuff, trying to avoid Trump's rage, but also saying, we've done this to ourselves and it's going to get bad.
Right. So remember at the start, you said, what's going on? I said, I've got a list. It's 3 or 4 things. And I got to one, and then we just followed a wonderful little path. Let's go back to that, because that's what else is going on. So one, we have tariffs. Fair enough. The bloke ran on him. Don't like him. Americans voted for him. I'm still against him.
Right.
But all right. 2, the tariffs are incoherent. They're absurd.
Completely.
They have no rationale. They're going to get rid of fentanyl, but then why tariff Canada, which doesn't bring in fentanyl? They're going to get rid of illegal immigration, but then why tariff Australia? They're going to onshore manufacturing, but why tariff bananas? They're going to help us with military security, but why tariff leather saddles? They're going to solve our bilateral trade deficits, but why tariff the United Kingdom where we have a surplus?
Right.
They're going to bring in revenue, except that we're going to make deals instead. We're going to use this as leverage for deals to get better deals. But why tariff the South Koreans, who we already have a free trade deal with? Right. And if what you wanted was a 10% tariff on the rest of the world and 30% on China, and if you calmly announced that on day one and then kept it in every day since then, and in fact, even went further and said, I want this to be a central part of American policy. I'm going to go to Congress and have them sign off on it. Then we could rely on it. And I might build a factory based on it. But at the moment, tariffs on Tuesday bear no relation to tariffs on Wednesday. Right. You can't respond to Tuesday's tariffs if you think they're going to be different the next day. You can respond in the sense we get all the costs, but we don't get the benefit. So that's the second shock that's happened, right?
Yep.
Which is incoherent, absurd, crazy, low quality, worst economic policy making process of my lifetime.
Oh, by far.
Yes. It's so hard, man. I want to be a calm academic, Rick. Take me back to the days when I could
listen. Believe me, I would love to be having a national debate over whether we should have a 38.5 or a 36.2 marginal tax rate at the top end. You know, I would love to go back to those days where we were having.
How about tonight? Like, once you're done with this
rational,
just call me tonight at 11 and we'll pretend, just the two of us.
Yes.
And we'll argue over a decimal point. So let me get back to my list though.
Yeah.
Third, related, tremendous uncertainty, right? across all domains of economic policy, because you don't know if the Fed chair is going to get fired. You don't know if we're going to have tariffs. You don't know whether they're going to pass a budget. You don't know if the budget's going to be blow it out a lot or a little, or and on and on and on it goes.
What's $4 trillion between friends?
Yeah, and also just like take my industry. I'm actually from one of America's most successful export industries. I sell higher education.
Mm-hmm.
I not only sell incredibly valuable exports, but also I export soft power across the world.
Mm-hmm.
We can't get kids to come in because they're not sure they'll be able to get visas. Right. We're not sure that they won't get stuck at the border. I'm a better exporter than most manufacturers you've ever met.
Right.
And someone's making my life hard. Sorry, back to Kanye.
No,
I don't want to be a shouting bloke. I never wanted to be that. Okay, next
I think that
I've got to get to it.
Yeah.
Is when the tariffs are so stupid that you're tariffing penguins and you're putting reciprocal tariffs on countries that have free trade agreements and on and on it goes. And I think this is what you're hearing from Wall Street is you realize the joint's run by idiots. So that inference takes you a long way out of tariffs. So we're watching tariffs, but we're learning about competence. And I think, Rick, you might go a step further. You might say we're learning about corruption and rule of law and all of that, but I'm going to stay in my lane.
Okay.
We're learning about competence. So if, God forbid, something happens, we got the wrong guys in charge.
I can set aside my antipathy towards Trump, and look at this entire economic noise machine. No one in the world was going to go out and hire Howard Lutnick to be a senior economic advisor at BlackRock or Blackstone or Citi or Goldman or anywhere. No one was going to even let Peter Navarro in the door in any serious way. And I think one of the things that we saw Moody's downgrade the last of the big rating agencies to knock us down a peg because of the chaos, because of the uncertainty, because of the incompetence or malfeasance, however you want to characterize it. But I also think they're starting to notice, I think everybody's starting to notice that the power of the T-bill, U.S. Treasury bonds, suddenly do not look like a rock solid investment globally anymore. And people are either slowing down the pace of picking up and investing in them or shoving them out the door. Where do you see the economic impacts on America if you end up with Japan and China and other countries saying, I'm going to skip this auction. I'm going to skip this cycle. I'm going to slow down my uptake. I'm going to diversify into other things. Where does the economy go when something like that starts to happen? We don't really have that scenario a lot in our history.
Cool. Hey, Rick, I'm going to take a moment to prove that you and I can disagree.
Okay.
And I want to pick up something that I think is a very bad habit.
Okay.
And I'm going to pick on you, but it's mostly for our audience.
No, please. I want to learn.
Countries don't do anything. Japan doesn't do anything. People in Japan do things. China sometimes does things because it has a massive state sector. Right. So it's the one exception. You're allowed to say China, right? Okay. But you said, what happens if Japan stops buying our bonds, right? Okay. It's really, it's a huge mistake. And people make this mistake with international trade all the time. So, and I really mean this to your audience. The great thing is you'll make fewer intellectual mistakes. You won't even notice the mistakes you don't make. But the mistakes you won't make will come about every time, always in the economy. You're talking about people doing things. So What happens if people, say an Australian retirement fund doesn't want to buy American bonds? Mm-hmm. That, I think, is your question. Exactly. And let's go back a step. Why would they not want to do that? They not want to do that because it no longer feels safer than putting money under the mattress. Why might it not feel safer? Well, read the papers. We have a Congress that's incapable of doing anything, including oversight, except passing a budget that makes no sense. Different people can vary where they are on the fiscal hawk versus fiscal dove, how much you're worried that borrowing more money is a big problem. I'm at the dovish end typically. My guess is, Rick, you might be more of a hawk than me.
I think a lot of the things that I've had to reset on is that no one in my former party actually believed any of this stuff. It was always just professional wrestling. So they would borrow the money anyway. So I'm not sure. I think I'm neutral to more dovish these days than I would have been 10 years ago.
Okay. So for I'm just going to tell you, I never understood this thing where people were like, the safest asset in the world is buying American government bonds. And I'm an Australian. And I look at the American political system, and I look at the fact that we have threats of debt ceiling defaults frequently, that we have government shutdowns, that we have budget impasses, and really no ability to make sure that the work of government keeps happening. And I was always confused why that was regarded as more safe than Australia, which is a functional two-party parliamentary system. But, myths get founded. And one of the reasons it is safe, by the way, is if everyone else thinks this is safe, then this is safe because everyone else is there protecting it and so on and so forth. So, look, the first thing is if this stuff goes south, first of all, that's a symptom before it's a cause. It's a symptom of dysfunction. The so-called Sell America trade, which is on at the moment, it's on again, off again, depends which day of the week you're talking about,
right,
is a symptom of a dysfunctional economic and political system. Then you're asking about what's the cause. The cause is actually, what are the effects? The effects are actually very simple. If you're regarded as a risk, people don't want to lend as much money to you, or they want to charge you a higher interest rate.
Right.
If you've ever calculated what your family mortgage would look like if the bank were to raise the interest rate by 0.5%, you'll notice your payments go up. Your payments go up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's start doing that with a $30 trillion national debt, and you'll discover that your payments go up even more. That's the simple thing.
This current budget that they're debating is, and I've seen some messy, sloppy, weird, bad budget decisions over a long career in politics, but this one seems to bundle up a whole bunch of things that are going to cause social cost and economic cost to a lot of people with the Medicare, Medicaid cuts. A very heavily stacked. I don't want to sound like a Bernie Sanders guy, but this is stacked towards the upper end of the upper end of the upper end of the economic food chain for $4 trillion of short-term cost. This bill, if it passes as it looks like if it passes in its current form, what do you think I mean, look, I know we're going to end up paying a lot more at emergency rooms for healthcare for poor people than we are right now. But what do you see the impacts of this bill looking like if it gets through the Senate?
Look, so it'll make Moody's look really smart for having downgraded America's debt. So you validated the ratings agency right there. We expect bond yields to rise a bit. Remember, a small percent times a humongous number is a very large number.
Sure.
What that means for people at home is just the government has less money left to do the things you hope they do, whether it's provide funding for research and development or for Medicare or Medicaid or for national defense. There's just less there. The other solution, of course, is they could tax you more to catch up. There's a standard Republican talking point, which is our children will inherit a higher debt. I'm not leaning into that because my children are also going to inherit, I hope, an incredibly productive economy and a higher quality material standard of living than me. And if they have to pay a little bit for that, I'm fine with that.
Trade-off we've made for a long time in this country.
Yeah. They are going to have a higher material standard of living unless we screw everything up. So I'm okay with them helping pay some of my bills. Not everyone feels that way, and that's okay. But I think the simple answer for what it means is more money is getting taken out of many families' paychecks and a little bit more sliding into some others. And if you're one of the ones who's getting less, then your family gets by on less. Now, are you one of those people? I have a pretty simple answer for you. Probably. If you drove yourself to work, you're one of the people who's probably going to get less out of this.
Yep.
So it's just reverse Robin Hood.
That's a great way of putting it, actually.
It's just pure reverse Robin Hood. We can talk about threat to democracy, America's credit, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, budgets are three things. They're redistribution between people, in this case, from poor to rich. They're budget deficits, which are macroeconomic risks, but they're also redistribution across generations. right? And a budget is a statement of values. And if your values are that you don't want to make sure people have health insurance, it's your statement. That's ultimately a moral statement rather than an economic one. And I'm not going to dare to tell your listeners who's right or wrong. I'm simply going to invite them to understand it as a statement of values and to judge accordingly.
It is one of those great mysteries in America why we can't do national health care when only every other major developed country has been able to do it. It's just a mystery. I don't know how that works. Hey, well, Justin Wolfers, I want to really thank you today for teaching me some stuff and enlightening me on where a lot of this big picture motion in the economy is going. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. Folks, you can follow Justin on the usual social media platforms. Tell them where they can find you, Justin.
I think I'm at Justin Wolfers, but maybe you've got better things to do with your life as well.
Well, you're great. We look forward to seeing you again. And thanks so much for coming on the show today. Thanks so much. And thank all of you folks for tuning in today. We will be back later in the week with more lives for here and for Lincoln Square. Thanks, everybody.